How long does it take for your company to activate a new customer? Nuvo helps LBM suppliers get customers ready to buy on house accounts in minutes, not weeks, not days. With instant verifications, streamlined job sheets, and real-time credit insights, your team can start loading trucks while your competitors are still checking references. Check out Nuvo. Reach out to the team at nuvo.com, that's nuvo.com, to learn more. Hey there, I'm Thea Dudley, also known as the Credit Overlord, and welcome to LBM Talks Credit. We are the only podcast that talks trade credit in the lumber and building material space. Never miss an episode, stay tuned, and we're glad you're here. Hey everyone, welcome back to another edition of LBM Talks Credit. I'm Thea Dudley, your host, also known as the Credit Overlord, and we're here to unpack the money, the metrics, and the madness behind building material industry trade credit. Now, if you're new to our format, buckle up because we don't script it, we don't hold back, and we just kind of go with what really happens in credit departments all across the country. I'm really excited today to have two people with me that, one I'm going to pick on a little bit because I can, because they're tech guys, and the other is they're doing something that I think is really cool, and we need to explore a little bit more and get into how this can really help, because I think it gets downplayed a lot. So Sid, I will never get your last name right, so I'm just going to let you roll into that. I am linguistically challenged, but you are the co-founder and CEO of Nuvo.
That's right. Thanks for having me on. It's Sid Malladi.
Thank you. I make it harder than it is. And then Dave Fulham, I'm happy that you're here. You are, and I'm not used to hearing this as an actual department, but head of
partnerships. That's right. Yeah.
Really
excited to be
that's not
speaking
a normal
to you
thing in our industry. Head of partnerships. It's usually operations.
Yeah. There should be more partnerships in the world. I think the approach that we take in whether it be working with the ecosystem and all the trade associations we're really close with, or working with customers or other service providers, is one around partnerships. So that's why I'm here speaking to you today. So excited to be on LBM Talks Credit.
I love that you guys actually have a good explanation for that, and it's what I picked because it was different, which is usually what I hear when people get super creative, like chief credit officer. It's like, when did that become a thing?
Senior executive vice president of, name your business buzzword.
I kind of think it's fun to just create your own thing there, but I got to pick on you guys a little bit because one of the things that is really frustrating to me, and since you guys are tech guys, I'm gonna kind of pick on you a little bit on this, is tech jargon. I don't know anybody that gets it. I think you guys just sit around and make stuff up to go, I wonder if they'll ask us what this means. So here, I'm going to give you some of my favorites. And, I think when we talk about partnerships, I think maybe if we didn't have so much of what makes sense to you, but when I hear it, I'm like, I don't know what end-to-end solution is. It's like, why can't you just say it works the whole way through?
We have a very strict no buzzwords policy internally at Nuvo, because ultimately what we're doing is selling outcomes to the credit departments. And the how we generate those outcomes, the technology changes all the time. Compared to the early 2000s to where we are today, we see capabilities around APIs and AI and new paradigm shifts that allow us to serve the credit community better than what was possible 15 to 20 years ago. But if the value is not clear cut and obvious to the recipient of this information, then what is even the point? This is not like a little science laboratory where we're toying around with different, scientific potions. We're ultimately here to drive better business outcomes within the credit department. So it's better to focus on that. And for what it's worth, being in the tech industry and reading through a lot of technology publications, we see a lot of this jargon, and it's always something that either makes me laugh if done at least in an attemptedly clever way, or bury my head in the sand if it's highly derivative. So it's entertainment value for the people on the outside, as long as it doesn't really get in the way and feels like it's wasting your time.
Oh no, we've had entertainment with it. I sat with a coworker and we made a tick of it was kind of like when MBA speak was all the buzz and they were using, let's get on a granular level and we'll sandlot this or parking lot it. And you're like, oh, okay, can you just say we're going to talk about it? Like you just, I don't know why you think you have to get all uppity about it, but we went through and it was like single source of truth.
Oh yeah.
Unless your
Take a
software is
shot when
Moses coming down from the mountain, I don't know what that means.
Yeah, I think that it's totally valid feedback there, and I'm sure you've got a long list of these. I think there's probably a lesson here for all of us in like communicating with somebody outside of the specialization. Could be in credit, could be in technology. You kind of get stuck in the weeds of your own thing. You get stuck in the how when you kind of lose sight of the why, which is why I think maybe it's so tempting when you like try and understand how something is working and then you meet somebody who might use it, whether that be your credit policy that they're on the other side of or like a software platform. It's really tempting to just get stuck in the very minutiae and then communicate it when like you'll lose a customer or a salesperson's trust if you're speaking too granular. I know maybe today we're going to talk about DSO a little bit later. Shooting that across the bow of a salesperson when they're trying to decide that, hey, should we take another order from this customer? Maybe that's going to go over their head and be difficult for them to digest as well. But there are some great ones in technology that people get stuck on. Single source of truth is a great one. The really funny piece about single sources of truth is everybody seems to have one, and so there must be many of these single sources of truth out there that people are chopping through.
Well, I think you brought up a good point. Every area of business has its own like speak. Like credit managers have their own vernacular that we use that we think is common when we say something where, we talk about a lien. And then when somebody, I'm like, no, not a judgment lien. I'm talking about a mechanic's lien. And it doesn't occur to us that maybe somebody who doesn't work in that. So some of it I think is a little unfair of me to pick on. But do some of these salesmen, do you think they rely so much on some of these buzzwords like digital transformation, scalable architecture? It's like, I don't even know what the hell that means. But do you think they use a lot of the buzzwords because they don't really know what they're talking about and it sounds impressive? It's like, well, this will baffle her. And it's like, yeah, I'm texting a friend going, what the hell does this mean?
Yeah, I think it's like a really sincere attempt to market an idea that they don't really understand what the full implication is. Like, I think even in the case of a lot of organizations that we partner with, you have like an office of maybe the CIO or a digital innovation team, and the words digital transformation get thrown around a lot. And these organizations don't really know what it is. The tech companies that sell tools and solutions don't really know what it means. But the moment, one party is using the same jargon as the other party and somehow relating it back to the tool that they're trying to sell, it's like, aha, this is what digital transformation must be. So I definitely think people get lost in the sauce a little bit around if you were to go one level deeper and say, what exactly are you trying to say? It's like, hey, I'm taking like a manual time-consuming process and I'm moving it online.
It doesn't sound as sexy when you say it that way. It's like, that sounds, right. It sounds kind of boring. I mean, I get it. Somebody's marketing team was working overtime, about their mission to disrupt the legacy workflows. It's like, that's just like, hey, old dude, step up your game. I mean, that's just say what you mean, I guess. But, I think not everybody is comfortable going, I don't know what you just meant by that. So that's when we're talking about that jargon, it always kind of threw it. I find it really hilarious. And I'm glad you guys are like, okay, we're going to talk real over tech talk. We're going to go with the reality piece of this. And if I can, if you're looking at me and I'm glazing over, it's like, she's really, there's like sawdust and circus music back there. She's really not getting what we're talking about. That you'll break it down and go, okay, we need to go one level down from where we're talking because she's not clicking with it. And I do appreciate that. It's not that I don't think I'm smart. It's just that some of this stuff goes, I'm not a tech person and I get lost in the language.
And you have a better BS meter than most people do.
No, I think I'm just mouthier because, it's like, I just can't. A lot of people will come away from the call and they're like, I have no idea what they were talking about. It's like, I don't know, but I got a lot of new jargon that the next time we do a demo, we're going to do a tick sheet every time they use one of these words. And we're going to make a note on it to see how many times they use tech talk that none of us understood.
Yeah, that's a great
It's
exercise.
a cool game.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that I think that maybe is worthwhile taking from the way that we might interact with something like ChatGPT is just asking somebody who tells you something you don't understand to tell it to me like I'm a 5-year-old, which I feel like is a great way to get people to think about how to simplify what they're saying and just say the thing that they're really trying to say rather than throwing in a whole bunch of jargon like transformation and whatever that might be bogging down what the real facts are.
Well, I do like listening to somebody that they've watched a lot of demos and then, someone on my team goes, okay, I'm going to try to explain to them what we're looking for. And they start using the language back and it's like, okay, either you're really good about this or you're just stringing sentences together with words that you've just crammed in that make no sense, but this guy's nodding back. So I don't think the two of you are making progress. You're just throwing slang back and forth at each other.
And the world just got worse as a result of
it's actually
of doing
entertaining,
that.
but it does bring us to talking. We started out referencing DSO, and I think people get lost when they start looking at DSO, and we get so fixated as credit people or as CFOs or company leaders at looking at our numbers from a very old school, one-dimensional kind of way, where it's what's my percent current, what's in my 90 bucket, and what's my DSO, that we've kind of even lost sight of what exactly does DSO mean? And are you placing any value on it? Should you be looking at days beyond terms? But even beyond that, you're missing a big piece of it. And that's part of that customer experience. And so when we think about how to measure impact, we sometimes miss that whole onboarding process. And that's where you guys are really fun to talk to about, because first of all, you don't use a bunch of jargon on me, but talking about that onboarding process and how it impacts the beginning of that relationship with the customer, which carries all the way through to when somebody pays their bill.
Yeah, there are a lot of very important elements in what you started to discuss, Thea. I think to kick off around DSO, day sales outstanding is an important concept just because you want to be able to track your cash cycle from when an order is placed or released and when you actually collect cash for it. And the reason why I'm really drawn to the idea of DSO is it's extremely core to the credit department's job. You essentially are extending credit lines in order to drive revenue. And if you weren't extending credit lines out, obviously your customers have their own cash cycles. They don't have the cash flows to pay for goods at the time of order. In the absence of, a non-zero DSO, you're probably constraining your revenue or your ability to close net new business with customers. But at the same time, DSO also serves as an important reminder around the time value of money. If you're selling building materials, which, they're not high margin goods, they're commodities. It's a very competitive industry. And if you're looking at, let's say, 30-day terms that you award your customers on a standard basis, and you're starting to see that your DBT is starting to tick up, where your customers are on average paying you 15 to 30 days after they're supposed to pay you. I think one of the most key things here is, as a credit manager, how do you ensure that you're not constraining credit sales while also not hurting the cash flows of your business? And DSO kind of like toes that very delicate balance of what is the acceptable amount to extend in order to maximize revenue and minimize cash flow delays. The example around the time value of money that I like to use when we have conversations with building materials credit departments is, if you're doing $1 billion of revenue per year as a building material supplier or distributor, and your cost of capital is 12% APR, and on average, your customers are paying you 30 days late, that means that 12 divided by 12 months, you're taking a hit of 1% APR equivalent when amortized into that 30-day delay window. So $10 million, which is 1% of your $1 billion in credit sales, is the cost, the economic cost that you are taking for allowing your customers to pay you 30 days late. And that's a really, I think, missed opportunity to appreciate, like, how do time and money interact with each other? Because there is a conversion rate between both of those units. And I think DSO, for that reason, is an important enough metric that it stay tracked. And obviously there are others like DBT that allow you to look at what your error rates are from what your projected DSOs should be. But I think, we've seen credit departments kind of not really being able to quantify, like, what are the implications of a DSO that's gone amok? It's hard to quantify that.
Okay,
You're like,
take that thought right there. One of the questions that comes up a lot in the credit community, and I get emailed this question a bunch, is what is an acceptable, and I'm using air quotes, what's acceptable as a DSO for our industry? And it's not as always easy to benchmark as we would like, because we as an industry are not the best at always sharing our data. So you rely on, maybe what, DNB will put out in their quarterly reports and their SIC codes, or you rely on Credit Research Foundation and to see, okay, maybe NACM has some data, but you start looking at, all right, this data has to come from somewhere. And when you start looking at all of the yards that don't contribute and you say, well, what's acceptable? I'm like, well, I guess part of it is I don't care what's acceptable to anybody else. It's what's acceptable to my company and my leadership and what we see as it. And, we used to have that check float where I'm going to mail you a check and I'm like, all right, I've got to give you a certain amount of days. And now I have to double it because the post office is, so well organized and there's no theft and fraud's not a thing. So we don't factor any of those in. But with payment portals and Venmo and all of the different ways to pay somebody, there's really, my DSO should be better than it's ever been. And that's not the case.
There are some really interesting strategies that we hear from credit managers that do this effectively using even just their own customer base as a means of optimizing their own DSOs. So you actually will have a pretty good data set through your own customer base that tells you what's possible across your customer base that you can use as an index. So if you've got 10% of your customers who are paying on time and regularly, and your DSO, maybe it's 30, for example, and you've got outliers in either direction, that kind of tells you the scope of total potential change. I think the credit team is really uniquely positioned to try and influence that and proving value in the credit department. I think if you can shift DSO by implementing some strategy, whether it be setting expectations really clearly and effectively with new customers when they come on board, and making sure that they don't fall into bad patterns with you. They actually respect the business as somebody who collects regularly, who invoices regularly on time, that the sales team's actually bought into that process as well. That if you can move that number a little bit, you can kind of prove what's possible internally to yourself, to customers, and then essentially be impacting the business by getting that cash in the door faster and converting revenue into cash, which is ultimately the business that every business is in, cash conversion. And so, yeah, I think Sid makes a really interesting point around like the multi-company cash management that credit facilitates and is really critical to getting sales done in B2B environments. The benchmarks are out there, as you mentioned. Really, the best data you'll ever get is going to be your own payment experiences. It's not a peer, it's not an industry, it's you. How much does your customer base respect you, the processes you've got in place, and how effective is your team at actually getting that in the door? What tools do you have in place to make sure you do all the good stuff there?
I'm going to use that how much your customers respect you line, because that's really powerful. I love that. That's like the takeaway of the day right now for me. But so I can take my best possible DSO and you benchmark it basically against my DSO, and that's going to give me a great way to go about it. So I love that idea. I think that's amazing. I still love that. How much do my customers respect me thing? That's going on a t-shirt. I love that a lot. So when we look at the whole, and I want to circle back to that whole onboarding process, because setting the expectation with a customer when you first get them, or maybe you've allowed some practices that are not great and you're having to go back and get credit applications from customers that have been there forever, and it's a little bit of a struggle, but getting that whole process put in place, and what the cost and the value of having errors to that process, or having it be a long drawn out 2-week type of thing where what is the cost of the errors, and the friction that happens there when you can't get an onboarding process that is more customer centric.
So I think onboarding is a really interesting area that we've decided to focus on. For those of you who don't know, Nuvo provides credit departments with the best in class electronic onboarding experience for customers who are setting up new customer accounts. It replaces any onboarding packets or paperwork, credit application forms with the digital experience for customers to very quickly go through the application process. It has built into it, real-time data validations of physical addresses, email addresses, EINs. It helps you mitigate fraud at the gate so that impersonators can't come through. It's connected to all of the government databases and credit bureaus and banks so that all of the data comes together in a really fluid way so that faster approvals may occur. But if you take a step back and you ask the question of what is the responsibility of the credit department, it's to onboard customers faster, and reduce revenue leakage in that process. If you're investing sales and marketing dollars and 20% of your customers who want to buy from you are dropping off in your process because it's too painful to submit all the paperwork, do the back and forth song and dance of getting all the required documentations, tax certificates.
Oh, Sid, I saw somebody's credit application that was 17 pages long. It was like 14 pages of rules of how to do business with us. And I'm like, you realize we're a commodity industry. There's
Right.
very few things you have that we can't find, that a customer can't find somewhere else. You're going to have to get a little more customer user friendly.
Yeah. I mean, customers have choice. I think that's the important thing to recognize. And making onboarding a high friction, very inconvenient process that requires a customer to go to a FedEx Kinko's to do a printout and then throw into a fax machine is not the way that business should be done. You have to take customers from I want to do business to I am ready to do business and start purchasing from you as quickly and efficiently as possible. And using onboarding technologies like what we've brought to market is a really important way to do so. But beyond just making faster, more data-driven approvals with as many insights as possible, credit departments are also tasked with having a tight feedback loop of how have the customers that we've onboarded and approved, how are they actually paying? And establishing a tight feedback loop ensures that you're able to be proactive around adjusting proactively those credit lines as your relationships with your customers scale up. And I think that's a really difficult part of the workflow, because the average credit department that we speak with onboards hundreds of new customers per year, spends 90% of their time there, and they have an existing portfolio of thousands of customers with payment patterns that are changing all the time, payment behaviors, credit bureau report scores, cash flows that are changing all the time, and they're unable to proactively respond and right size credit exposure against those relationships. So really tying onboarding speed and efficiency to this ongoing monitoring capability to make proactive decisions, I think is like the home run that allows the entire department to operate more effectively. And I also wanted to go back to an earlier point that you made about check float, because one of the areas of impact that we've seen as recently as in the last 2 months is within the onboarding process that Nuvo supports, allowing for the auto enrollment for ACH and credit card payments is starting to move the needle quite considerably. Setting the expectation at the start of the relationship that you're not an old school check cashing shop, that you have the ability to securely collect ACH or credit card information in a compliant way, and setting that expectation that when we issue you, whether it's Net 7 or Net 30, we're going to enroll you into our automated digital payments platform so that those payments are processed on the day that we agree upon, it sets the relationship up for greater respect, to Dave's point, that you are a credit department who has your house in order. You've insisted on developing your own homegrown policies, and you have the tools and technologies to enforce those policies across your entire customer base in a fair and equitable way. That sets the relationship off in a very different tone from, hey, I'm just, loosey-goosey. You can pay me when you want. You can take me on a ride. You can take advantage of our organization. Like that's not the right way to establish the relationship. So onboarding should really be viewed as the moment in time where a customer is building their first impression of your brand. And that impression should be one of, I kind of think about it like a tiger mom. You want to give like tough love, right? I'm going to make it easy for you to onboard. I'm going to make it fast for you to get approvals. I'm going to deliver a very compelling experience for you to place your first order. And all credit approvals that you get are going to be data-driven, personalized. We're not going to use bias or historical experiences of having gotten burned from business A or business B. We're going to treat you for who you uniquely are. But at the same time, you got to follow the rules. And if you don't, you're going to be grounded. There's got to be that element of tough love that goes into establishing really strong credit relationships. And onboarding is the best moment in time to establish that.
The other T-shirt for you here is that we'll give you the credit, but we do want the cash. That's the takeaway.
Listen, don't get confused. Everybody has their job here. Your job is to make sure I get paid on time. My job is to, front you everything you need within the time period we agreed on. And, I think one of the things that, I hear a lot from customers is, well, we have our own systems and, our owner really likes to do check. And it's like, well, we're just, unfortunately, if your check's in the mail, we're not going to be able to release any more orders. We're more in it's such a more transient, basically you don't have anywhere to hide. There is no float anymore. That kind of went the wayside. So, I really love the teach the customer to respect you thing, because a lot of departments, a lot of companies have trained, they've just trained their customers poorly. They've trained it to be, well, it's okay. They pay us late. This is how they've always done it. We've known them forever. It's like, dude, I do not care. We had a deal. I've got bills too.
Well, one of the ways that we see some of these shifts happening in a more advantageous direction are offer a menu of choices. Like on Nuvo, for example, some of our credit teams will design their onboarding experience in such a way that they ask their customer, do you prefer to pay us via ACH, auto pay? Do you prefer to pay us by credit card, or do you prefer to pay us by check? And they'll add a caveat there that says, if you choose to pay us by credit card, you're eating the 2.9% fee. If you're paying us by check, we're going to give you a net 15 approval instead of a net 30 approval, because there's an incorporation of check float and
you're just
return
trying
checks.
To stir all kind of stuff in that pot now.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not. It's not that I'm not digging it. It's just, it's a slow industry to change. But I think throwing some things in there where it's like, look, you've got choices and there's repercussions and there's rewards, so that everybody goes home happy.
It incentivizes the right behaviors, but still, I think in any healthy relationship, you need to have healthy communication and an understanding of each other's position around what's advantageous to them. And I think the reason why we see the onboarding process as so powerful is that it allows your customers with whom you have really strong commercial relationships with to understand your position. If you choose to pay by credit card, we have to take on fees, and that hurts our ability to keep prices low, and therefore we pass fees on to our customers. That sounds fair. When people choose to pay by check, there is a return check probability. There's a fee associated with that. Delays occur because of post office problems. So it's going to constrain the terms that we're able to extend. If you go through ACH AutoPay, we see very low, dispute rates or issue rates associated with that. We see on-time payment. So we're going to give you the full generous 30-day terms with the full credit limit that you deserve. So a customer can say, hey, my owner has this preference, but you can now go to that owner with a conversation around here's the menu of options and here's why the options are designed the way that they are, and ultimately select whatever makes the most sense for you. So you want to shift people with a sense of empathy, choice, and context. The worst thing that you could do is overnight go to your customers and slap them on the wrist and say, hey, too bad. We're going to take something away from you because you're now under punitive measures. Like, nobody likes to feel like they're the naughty
It's just
child
like,
on the
what, I've
playground.
had it, we're changing, this is it.
Yeah.
But no,
So,
I think that it's going to be an educational process. It's going to be a slow move. It's going to be, I mean, even getting salesmen to go, hey, send this link for onboarding. Then and they're like, no, I want to see the credit app. I want to see it. I want to make sure they filled it out. It's like, yeah, here's the thing. There's a lot of sometimes sensitive information on there. Social security numbers, bank account numbers, and it's much healthier for everybody. And it's especially in today's day and age where fraud is so prevalent. How about we put it in a secure situation where they can, auto sign it and it comes right in. Nobody has to touch it. No one has to worry about where their stuff is. It's encrypted. You've given your customers that security. Plus, you've given your company that bandwidth as well, where it's like, look, we're not responsible for that. I don't want to be accused of, well, Fred left it on his truck seat and somebody grabbed it, or, took the numbers and, now this poor guy's social security numbers all over the dark web. And I know that sounds extreme and I sound like a paranoid, conspiracy theory, but that's how things happen. I mean, unfortunately, information gets into the wrong hands or it gets mishandled and it causes problems.
One of the biggest nightmare situations that I've seen, and this is crazy, but unfortunately a bit common, which is salesmen will ask customers to text or send to their personal emails, sign credit apps with social security numbers, personal guarantees, bank account information. And then when sales reps on average have a shorter tenure than credit teams, and then they leave those respective organizations and take their customer data with them.
Yeah.
And in scenarios, especially where they don't leave on the best of terms, you're just stuck with so much risk exposure that you're unnecessarily taking on. And it's like, how in cybersecurity attacks, the most intelligent hackers, they don't go and directly attack the database. They go and find the most vulnerable link in the human chain to social engineer leaks and exposures. So for all of the millions and millions of dollars in IT spend going into information security, to now instead have, weakness in your process around not being able to control who has access to what information as these paper documents get floated around through text messages and email inboxes is like, personally to me, I'm like, hey,
it's horrifying.
We should just horrifying. Let's just cut this cut this out.
All on board for, I love all of the ability that tech gives us. And it gives me so much more time back with my day to be able to work with my teams or my customers instead of I'm playing with paper. And I love that you guys are, and let me see if I can find the tech jargon to work it. Redefining the future of credit. We're going to use that one because that doesn't sound so like geeky.
Via digital transformation, AI-powered insights.
any of the other like cloud native, agile framework stuff that we could throw in there. But so guys, thank you so much for being with us today. I know we could go down this road for and I've loved the last portion of our conversation had just so great takeaways for credit people and for CFOs and people leading their companies. How do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, I mean, you could either email David or I directly at sid@nuvo.com or david@nuvo.com. Check us out on our website. It's nuvo.com. And
so nuvo.com, right?
Yeah. I can say it 3 more times.
I think that's my job.
So check us out.
I appreciate you guys being here. I mean, I love and thank you for. And in case you're listening and not familiar, you've heard us talk about Nuvo before. Thanking them for being kind enough to sponsor the LBM Talks Credit podcasts, and because we all have bills. The show has bills too. We appreciate you guys being there to support the LBM industry.
Thanks. Yeah. We love what you're doing with Credit Talks. So
thank
excited
you.
to keep on supporting the show.
Well, we'll have to have you guys come on back. So Everybody, thanks for listening to another episode of LBM Talks Credit. And I'm Thea Dudley here with Sid and David from Nuvo. That's nuvo.com. And if today's episode gave you a little something to chew on, drop us a line and share it with us. Let us know what you'd like to see coming up in future episodes. And until then, keep the jargon to a minimum. Visit us on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. We come out every other Tuesday. And until then, we're just helping trade credit speak its mind, one episode at a time.